The day in the life of an entrepreneur is not easy. They have to wear so many hats. They have to be so many people in the role of being an entrepreneur that the feedback that you're given, whether it's someone posting something online or somebody putting a review on your business, it's really hurtful, and it impacts their business, because this is something that other people are looking at, right? When considering hiring or employing that person, so being mindful is so important. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's show. On today's podcast episode, we have Lisa Dare from Lisa Dare and Associates. And today, Lisa is going to share her story, what her journey is, and I'm just going to hand the mic over to Lisa. Lisa, can you please share a little bit about what you do, who you help, and tell them a little bit about your story?
Yeah, absolutely, Cassie. So I'm an executive coach. So that's sort of my primary piece of work that I do. I'm also a facilitator and leadership practitioner. And so primarily the people that I work with are leaders at all levels of organizations. They could be emerging leaders, high potential individuals, middle managers, senior leaders, all the way through to the C-suite. So it's primarily my focus is around leadership development, but inevitably, whenever you're working with people, we're also dealing with all the other challenges that come with being human and a leader. So that's a big part of what I do. And I also facilitate as well around a lot of the topics that are related to leadership, communication, strategic thinking and planning, just a whole sort of coaching as well. So helping leaders to learn that coach approach. So I have a whole sort of spectrum of things that I do that are related to leadership development and coaching.
Awesome. And can you just let us know a little bit about like how long you've been in the industry?
Yes. So actually, it's hard to believe, Cassie, but I did my coach training in 2005. So if we do the math on that, it's close to 20 years that I have been coaching. And sort of initially sort of on and off because I was working full time, and then full time I've been doing it for now 16 years, and still loving it.
Oh, that is fabulous. That is fabulous. And the reason why I ask is because I want to kind of lead that into the segue into like today's conversation, because I feel like the conversations that we've had have been so powerful about your experiences, what you've been through, what your journey looks like. And, I know there are a lot of entrepreneurs that have gone through that same kind of journey, but aren't really willing to really share, myself included.
Mhm.
So I wanted to just
Yeah.
go into some of the facilitation, like what does that mean, and when you're a coordinator, what does that mean? What are you doing?
Yeah, that's a great question, Cassie, because I would say that facilitation is often gets it often gets put in with training, right? So people say, "Oh, well, you're a trainer," right? And it's like, well, no, not really, right? So facilitation for me really is about being in a space with learners where you're creating a space for them to learn, discover, and explore. And as a facilitator, I'm presenting material, but I'm really creating with the group their learning experience. Versus, I see training as a very sort of transactional kind of process where you're showing somebody something, you're telling them how to do it. You might have the manual there, and you say, "Here's how you enter something into the call, the CRM database," right? Versus facilitation can very much be a transformational process. But having said that, as you can well appreciate, being somebody that creates transformation is not an easy task, because it really relies on a number of different interpersonal skills to be able to do that successfully.
Right, right. And I would love for you to kind of um, go into some of your experiences in that industry and like, you know.
Yeah, it's an interesting industry, right? First of all, I would say I know it's very competitive because there's lots of entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, business owners that have that as a pillar of business within what they do. So it's one of their service offerings is to facilitate or run workshops, that type of thing. And what I can say is that for your listeners, right, doing that type of work is not for the faint of heart. um, you and I had a conversation around the feedback, right? We always want to
Right.
get feedback to know how we're doing. And know how we can be better, how we can serve people better, how we can create more positive experiences for them. So I can share one particular situation that just happened quite recently around some feedback that I got from facilitation. So I think, of course, now post pandemic, one of the things that has become very common for organizations is to go with virtual presentations versus ones where they have the in-person facilitation and learning. Certainly from a cost perspective and from a convenience factor, they're looking at that. And so most recently, about a month ago, I did a virtual facilitation for a client that I had worked for before. And I contract to a larger organization that serves this client, and received a email from my contact with my consulting firm saying, "Oh, I got some feedback and wondering if you'd like to hear it. It is constructive." And I sort of bit my lip and said, "Okay, right," because it is all in service of me being better. So
Right.
I said yes. And then I actually got the feedback a couple of days ago via email. And I have to say, it was probably one of the most gut-wrenching, emotionally impactful pieces of feedback that I'd ever received. The feedback started with the individual saying, calling me wildly unprofessional, and then listed a whole gamut of things that I had done, including being insensitive to people who are introverts and on the neurodivergent spectrum, forcing them to be on camera the whole time, mocking people who are not on camera, and then ending with the person saying that they had never seen a worse facilitator in their whole career and that they would highly recommend that I never be hired again. So needless to say, I, first of all, did not think that that was actually constructive feedback, because I don't think that there was anything in that was of any sort of nature for me to improve. It just felt like this person was like just pushing me out the door. But it's part of it is part of what we face, right? Is that we are there trying to please a very broad audience. And I know you and I talked about this, that I did a bit of soul searching around it, because needless to say, it was like a giant stab in the heart,
Right.
because I do actually take my work very seriously and I see myself as very much professional. So that was like, first of all, a horrible slap in the face, to say the least. But then I really started to think about, what could I extract from this that would actually be useful and be of service, right? Because our normal reaction to something like this is to simply want to hide under a rock and make it go away.
Right.
But what I've come to the conclusion of, Cassie, is how I want to turn this around. And I'm going to speak to my consulting contact, is to say that I'd like this individual who gave the feedback to know the impact of their feedback. I'd like them to know some of the backstory of what had happened during the facilitation.
Right.
And I'd also like them to know that that isn't constructive feedback. So those are some pieces of learning that I want to actually impart on this individual.
Right. And just in our conversation and how it unfolded and how you you broke down, I mean, I can relate to it on so many levels, and I can relate to, not getting the right kind of feedback, or even feedback online that's not true, and how it damages the reputation of entrepreneurs and business owners. And it's an unfair game. So I would really love for you to really go into how it should have been presented, and how it made you feel.
Yeah, that's such a great question. So the other thing I also wanted to mention as well, Cassie, and you and I touched on this a bit, is um, there's so much more awareness around um, the impact of trauma on people, right? And that we've all experienced different forms of trauma,
Right.
which is again connected to a greater awareness and support around mental health, right, and
Right.
mental wellness. And so the other thing from this particular situation that I would also share is that it triggered for me, and I hadn't realized it right away, it triggered for me a past experience with a very toxic bullying boss, who actually was, I discovered later, given the task of pushing me out of the organization.
Mm.
Um, and so this feedback that I'd received from this workshop was very reminiscent of how this boss had approached me during a performance evaluation. Almost similar wording, right? I don't know why you would have ever been hired for this job. Our sales are, you can't blame anybody else for the sales failing, even though you have two other partners, because you're the lead person. It's your responsibility. You should really go back to being a clinical pharmacist. You know nothing about this industry. Like, and you have a choice. You can either stay and be on a performance improvement plan, or you can just quit now, right? Like, literally, that's how this. And so how could that not be traumatic to somebody?
Right.
And then to again have feedback like this. So I think one of the things it's really important, I think, to distinguish is that we're we're in a society now where it's like everything is about like, oh, we'd love your feedback. Right? It's
Right.
just like, but how many people actually know how to give it properly, right? How many people do it in a thoughtful and supportive manner, right?
Mhm.
It's, to your point, right? It's vicious, it's
Mhm.
nasty, right? It's vindictive, it's personal, right?
Mhm.
When we actually are giving feedback in support of somebody, for example, this individual could have said, it would have been helpful if the presenter had actually provided specific times for when we were going to be breaking so that I could connect with my team during those breaks. Or, if the presenter could just let people know that cameras are an option and that, they can use other ways of communicating well in the session. That would be then a way of, to your question, Cassie, presenting feedback that's like, hey, I want to be helpful because I think this would have really helped me to have a better learning experience, and it would help the person to
Right.
be more effective in a virtual space. So, um, so those would be some of the examples, Cassie, that I would share that are constructive versus destructive.
Mhm. Mhm. And some of the things they don't understand is that in saying those things, it's tearing the person down. And there are lots of people that give up or stop fighting for, because they can't manage it. They don't want to be online. They don't want to share their stories. They don't want to be out there because they're afraid of what they're going to have or hear. Because in the society now, they're not giving any grace. And I know we spoke about grace. It, it's it's lacking. It's lacking in the workplace. It's lacking in everywhere that you go. You hear people speaking to each other in such a mean and malicious way, and it's not helpful, because we need more people like you doing the things that you're doing to help to facilitate, that are actually out there helping.
I was just going to just add to what you said, Cassie, in that because a lot of the work that I do is in that leadership space, this is an individual that's part of a cohort that was nominated to be in a leadership development program. So to your point, how does that behavior particularly to someone who technically is a guest to your organization, right? They're a guest in that they've been invited to present and facilitate information to you as an employee. What does that mean about that person's leadership qualities, right? What
Mm-hmm.
happens if somebody on their team doesn't perform well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so to your point, yes, in particular, grace in the virtual space, because anything could be happening, right?
Right.
For example, right, an outage, right? We actually had an outage here where I live because there were people stealing copper from the fiber optic network, right? You can't, like, how could anyone do anything about that, right? But you can't be angry with somebody because, oh my gosh, right? The power went on their laptop. And it's like, well, like I can't predict somebody stealing copper, right? So it's
Correct.
like, so to
Correct.
your point, can we just be kind? Can
Correct.
we start by just being kind to one another? So
Mm-hmm.
yes. And I'm sorry, you had a point that you wanted to share as well.
No, I was just saying, like taking this situation, and moving forward from it. How are you planning on, or what are the next steps for you in terms of moving forward from that situation?
Yeah, so I think, a couple of things that I would share, Cassie, because I know, this is also about helping entrepreneurs deal with setbacks, right? Deal
Mm-hmm.
with challenges in their own life that might be of a similar nature, right? Where somebody basically tells you, for lack of a better term, you suck and you shouldn't try
Right.
to do this anymore, right? Is first of all, what helps me, Cassie, is I sort of initially said, I did ask the person that provided the information to me, I said, were there any other comments of that nature, right? Was there any other feedback? And she said, no,
Right.
not that I'm aware of. So my logical brain goes, there's an N of one. Right?
Right.
So that's usually kind of what helps me, first of all, is I know I'm going to react to it emotionally, but let's go to my logical brain so that I don't really get into the emotional state. So I go, okay, there's an N of one. And then what helps me, Cassie, is I then go, I know I had two producers for that session. So I'm going to go to my producers and ask them if they saw anything or observed anything, because that will help me again. Right.
Right.
And then, to be honest, I did actually let myself react to it. I did. I spoke to my husband, and in the safety of being with somebody that I could be vulnerable with, I cried, um, and just said, this is like a stab in the heart. I said, calling me unprofessional is like horrible, right? It's like the
Right.
worst thing someone could accuse me of.
Right.
And moving forward from this, Cassie, I'm doing this, right? I'm sharing this story with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sharing it because I want others to know that if they've had anything in a similar light, that
Mm-hmm.
there is going to be life after this, right?
Right.
It's going to feel horrible in the moment,
Right.
but you will survive it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Through support, through reaching out to others to get reassurance, right? I do have the backing of my consulting firm. By the way, I do want to say that my
Mm-hmm.
consulting firm is backing me and saying, we know that we have no doubts about you. The client themselves have no doubt about you. So I really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think it's also what I would say, Cassie, is what I think is really essential for all of us, in particular entrepreneurs, because we have to slog it out every day, is to build resilience, right? To
Mm-hmm.
build resilience. Um, Access tools, and there's some great tools that help to build resilience.
Mm-hmm.
Everything from a mindfulness practice um, to just taking time out to do something that rejuvenates you
Right.
and re-energizes you.
Right.
But in terms of how I'm moving forward, Cassie, I will be meeting with my consulting contact. I'm going to be asking them to share feedback to this individual, the impact. I will, say, here's some pieces of learning I think this person could benefit from.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd also like to know what kind of conversation the client had with this individual as well. So,
Right.
so those are the pieces of follow up for me from. from the situation.
Right. And it's helpful that you're sharing this because again, for entrepreneurs out there and people that aren't entrepreneurs watching, the day in the life of an entrepreneur is not easy. They have to wear so many hats. They have to be so many people in the role of being an entrepreneur that the feedback that you're given, whether it's someone posting something online or somebody putting a review on your business, it's really hurtful and it impacts their business because this is something that other people are looking at, right? When considering hiring or employing that person. So being mindful is so important.
Yes, and I think, what, to your point, what has also made it more difficult in the world that we live in today is the ability to be anonymous,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there's this sort of the shield of anonymity, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can just post using whatever name I want, or I don't share a name and I decide I'm going to say something, nasty about somebody, right? Or,
Right.
or there's like, kind of like you said, like sometimes people do smear campaigns, right? Where they're purposely putting negative reviews in about a company. And again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there's a whole, I think, piece for entrepreneurs around developing emotional resiliency,
Mm-hmm.
and just, I guess, staying true to, and what's the word I want to say? It's about being grounded in what's important to you and why you're doing what you're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because undoubtedly, we're going to get the haters.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to get the people that are jealous, right?
Mm-hmm.
The people that just decide they don't want us to be successful,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we're going to have to develop our own strategies to deal with that, right? Because unfortunately, it's just not going to go away.
Correct. 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 And can you share some strategies that you think would be useful outside of the strategies that you're employing for yourself, but just
Mhm.
something that you think would be useful for fellow entrepreneur to employ?
Well, I think, one of the things that comes to mind for me, Cassie, is about community. Um, Being in some type of community with
Mm,
others that will support you, that appreciate the challenges that you have. So I'm part of a mastermind because I think being an entrepreneur, right, depending on the size of your organization,
right.
it's a lonely place to be, right? Many of
Right.
us are solopreneurs, or we have small companies, where we don't necessarily employ a lot of people. And so, it's a lonely place to be. So having community,
Mm-hmm.
um, I think it's also about having an abundance mindset, right?
Ooh.
So I think it's really important for us not to see others that may be doing something similar to us as a competitor, but to say, well, isn't that great? There's room for all of us. There's space for all of us to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And that person just kind of do it in a different way, right? They're going to serve a client that doesn't, work for me, right?
Right.
So I think it's really important not to see it as I only have so much and I've got to grab it before someone else does, but to just say, there's so much abundance here, right?
Right.
Like, let's all share in the success of what we could do, right?
Okay.
And I think, what the other thing is, Cassie, it is just taking the time to manage your energy,
Mm-hmm.
continue to learn, right? And put yourself first, right?
Ooh.
It's so easy to put our organization, our work, our business first, right? Others first.
Mm-hmm.
But if we are not ensuring that we put ourselves first so that we are present and able to give the best version of ourselves to our business,
Wow.
then that suffers, right? So these are some of the things that I think are really valuable for people to think about as entrepreneurs.
I love that. I love that because we so seldom put ourselves first. And it's, the job first, the client first, their them first, always. I love that. And did you always have that? Or is that learned through mentorship?
Oh, my dear, that was definitely learned over time, right? I mean, right, culturally, right, as a woman, right,
Mm.
there is this tendency, right, to look after everyone else. I'm the oldest, right? I had like lots of the cards were stacked against me, right? It's like, um, but what I can share, Cassie, is why this really has hit home for me. It's not because I see it in my clients, but I had my own. I've had several, I would say, episodes of burnout, right? Not to the point where, I needed, to step back for a significant period of time, but just those, just enough of a glimpse of like, okay, this is not me, right? And this is
Mhm.
not feeling good, right? And
Mhm.
I need to really be mindful, right? The situations, I mean, I had this a couple of weeks ago where I woke up on a Monday and I was just like, I don't even want to get out of bed. Like, I do not want to do a thing. Like, nothing matters to me, which is not me
Mhm.
at all. Thankfully, I only had 2 clients booked that day because honestly, it was like everything that I could do to get through that. Um,
Mhm.
Went for a walk and it's still like, okay, it's still not right. It's like a battery that's been so discharged that it's
Right.
just like it's not charging. And so that for me was I need to be doing something different, right? I need to
Mm.
be paying attention to this.
And so many times that's a clear indication that something's wrong, right? And I think
Mhm.
a lot of the times we feel those emotions as people, as entrepreneurs too, to repress them and push them down because we're, it's sometimes we're like, oh, that's just, the monkey mind, or that's just my mind. No, it's actually your inner self saying, hey, listen, you need to stop. You need to take a break, take a moment. And I know it's so hard, especially when you have people and clients counting on you.
Yes. We live very much in a culture of suck it up and move on, right?
Ooh.
It's this,
Mhm.
yeah, it's just as like, oh, well, what's the matter with you? Like, just suck it up, right? Like, just go.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it starts with us as role models to say, no, it's okay to talk about mental health. It's okay
Mhm.
to talk about mental wellness. And
Mhm.
it's okay to prioritize it, right? As much as our physical health, right? Because I
Mhm.
think there's been a huge amount of emphasis on physical health. But what do we, we're doing more about it, but we need to continue to destigmatize mental health and mental wellness.
Mhm.
So that, because that is equally as important, if not more important, right? And I think to what you're saying, Cassie, there's a great book, which is, I think, I can't remember the exact title, but it's something about the body, your body knows, or something like that, right? Or, but it's something about to do with that sort of the signals and cues that our body give us before sometimes we're even cognitively aware, right? It's
Oh,
like because we're already getting those bodily signals.
oh. And that's so important because I know so many people, I mean, myself included, where I have had, like a really bad traumatic episode, from a bad experience. And, it will wipe you out. And sometimes for years. So,
Mhm.
it is important that we speak. It's important that we share our experiences, because if we don't speak about it, then nobody knows, and they feel isolated in their own pain or grief or trauma. And they're like, well, it must be something with them, not knowing that it's happening to so many other people, because I think we're afraid because of that stigma around it.
Yes, and I think, just back to our original topic around this feedback piece is that people need to recognize that they are responsible and accountable for
Mm.
the impact that they have as a result of their feedback, right?
Ooh,
Um,
I love
and
that. Could you repeat that again? I think
yeah,
we need to hear that again.
yeah, I was saying, hopefully I can remember this because I
They're
sometimes spout,
responsible. Yep.
but I yeah, that people need to be aware that they are responsible and accountable for the impact that they have with their feedback. right?
Mhm.
It is a privilege, right? It's not a, oh, I get to say whatever I want about somebody because I feel like it. It's like, no, you have a responsibility, right? Because in my world, everybody is a leader, right? Whether you actually have that role or title, everybody is a leader, right? We are responsible for ourselves, right? We're responsible for the impact that we have on others, and we're also accountable, right?
Mhm.
So back to the point that you made, Kessie, I connect this to when we're saying something that is unkind, right? And it's not really in service of anything. It
Mhm.
is also possible that that could do a lot of damage, as you said, right? To the point that you said, what if somebody's had a traumatic event, like, like my example, a
Mhm.
toxic boss, right? And I think there's a lot of discussion around that now, right? Bullying in the workplace, right?
Mhm.
Particularly from bosses.
Mhm.
So what if that, as I said, this person sharing this feedback used language that was similar to that boss that bullied me. Now,
Mhm.
fortunately, I've had a lot of many years transpired and I've dealt with it. However, that could be very triggering for somebody else, right?
Mhm.
To have that, because as you said, if somebody's been exposed to something traumatic, a trigger could cause somebody to relive that trauma all over again.
Mhm. Mhm. And it happens more than I think people discuss. You know, I several clients or people that I've interviewed have spoken about things that are traumatic to them, why they stay off of, whether it be social media, why they don't be of bigger service,
Mm,
and why they're not as big as they should be, sharing the message, helping as many people because of either fear or depression or whatever it is that's going on, right? That allows them not to be able to show up, and I'm happy that in spite of you show up.
Well, and I think that that also brings up a really important point, Cassie. So, one is, showing up, right? And actually, I think as difficult as it is for those of us who maybe feel a little bit more grounded within ourselves, to create the space and a container for people to share, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it is important for people to share, right? The stories matter.
Mm-hmm.
And the stories are really what helps to bring awareness to and bring to the surface these issues, right?
Right.
Because they're out there, right? As you and I
Mm-hmm.
have talked about.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is a really important part of it, is to be willing to share those stories, right? The more we are able to do that, the greater the connection becomes.
Right.
In service of people learning to be more aware of changing behaviors,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because as you said, the other thing that I think what you said, which really kind of saddens me, is it has people play small, right?
Mm.
It holds them in a place where they're not able to bring all of what they could to the world, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
they're being held almost captive by this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and to me, there's something really wrong about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's sort of the passion for me, is like, yes, I could take the situation that I just shared and make it all about me and my struggle.
Right.
But I'd like to turn it around and say, how can this be something that will actually help leaders in organizations be better leaders, be better people, right? To
Mm.
be like more, um, be more supportive, be more compassionate, be more caring about the people that work for them, with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the people that they serve.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that. I love that. And I love the fact that you're sharing everything that you've shared today. Is there anything that you would like to share with our audience, like how they can reach you, words to leave them with today?
Yes, so definitely, I would love it if people, if there's something here that caught people's attention. I have a newsletter, so they can subscribe to my newsletter. I do that weekly, and I share different topics. I most recently did share one on burnout. And I did a tribute to mothers for Mother's Day. But I share a whole bunch of different topics. I will most likely talk about constructive and destructive feedback in my newsletter this week. They can reach out to me. They can follow me on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, any of those social media outlets. And I would love, if I'm able to, Cassie, I would love to just share. I've got just a really great little document on listening, because I think one of the most powerful things that we can do, particularly when people are struggling and they're having a difficult time, is simply to be with them and to listen. But it's one of those things that really is, I think, a lifelong pursuit to become masterful at. And so I just put together a simple little 6 tips on becoming a more effective listener. So happy to share that link with you, and people can download that. They want to just have that as a reference.
Oh, thank you so much. I will definitely put the link down below once we post it on our YouTube so that they can get access to that. And I will share the rest of links with everybody in the bottom in our YouTube. And for anybody listening on our podcast channel, you can check out our YouTube where you can collect it there. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I appreciate it. You have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, you too, Cassie, and thank you for the opportunity to share with you and your listeners.